I didn't accept the letter as anything but a letter. I mean, there are some people who were unhappy with the letter. Let me say, some said that some people were unhappy with the letter. I'll put it in somebody else's mouth because it was I don't even know. It didn't sound like Joe Biden to me. It really didn't. But
please tell us what you told President Biden to persuade him to step aside.
Well, I've never shared any conversations with the President of the United States publicly, no.
It said that he's furious at you. Is he?
Well, he knows that I love him very much.
I understand that you don't want to own this, but it is so well reported that you were the leader of a pressure campaign.
No, I wasn't a leader of any pressure party. Well, let me say things that I didn't do. I didn't call one person. I did not call one person. I could always say to him, I never called anybody.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about rapidly declining Nancy Pelosi, who is doing interviews in which she struggles to explain why or how the Democrats staged a coup against Joe Biden, okay? And she claims that, hey, I wasn't really a part of it. It was only Joe Biden's decision in some interviews. And then in other interviews, she says, well, I wasn't that impressed with Biden's political operation. And I just don't think it was happening, right? It wasn't happening in regards to his campaign having the momentum that it needed, the operation that it needed in order to beat Trump. But according to her, she had nothing to do with it.
I love him so much. I think he's been really a fantastic president of the United States. So I really wanted him to make a decision of a better campaign because they were not facing the fact of what was happening. Just a little background.
It was like
I've
you
never
felt his
been
pain.
that impressed with his political operation.
Biden's operation.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I just happened to. They won the White House. Bravo, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so my concern was this ain't happening. And we have to make a decision for this to happen. And the president has to make the decision for that to happen. Let me just say, I won't say necessarily I knew what I was doing at that time. I knew what I was doing in the whole thing, not just that show.
And what was that?
That Donald Trump would never set foot in the White House again.
Yeah, so that is Nancy Pelosi, who is barely coherent, okay? I'm not entirely sure why we aren't having conversations about whether or not Nancy Pelosi should continue to serve, considering how she is declining just as much as Joe Biden. It is extremely clear. I mean, we aren't really having conversations about Joe Biden, right, serving, and he's allegedly president of the United States, okay? We don't really know who's running the country, okay? Kamala is campaigning, so I'm not entirely sure if she's running anything. Biden was spending time on the beach. Yeah, who's actually running the country? Nobody knows, okay? Nobody knows. But with that being said, again, you have Nancy Pelosi coming out here and making some very interesting statements that I think she's personally struggling to keep her story straight in regards to not trying to overtly say that, hey, she had something to do with it, while at the same time trying to address the questions that the media has about, hey, did you guys actually overthrow Joe Biden? Now, they're not actually pressing Nancy Pelosi the way that they should be pressing Nancy Pelosi. They're just letting Nancy Pelosi lie, right? This is what they're doing, okay, with no pushback whatsoever, okay? These are softball interviews where they're asking the questions that they have to ask. But again, they're not really trying to poke holes in Nancy Pelosi's story, okay? Because the story really doesn't make sense. Everybody can see that she's clearly lying, okay? And she definitely was involved in the coup. The question really is, did the coup end up the way that Nancy Pelosi and the elites in the Democrat Party wanted, okay? Because I think the real story is that Kamala Harris basically hijacked the coup by forcing Joe Biden to endorse her, or maybe Joe Biden endorsed Kamala Harris as an FU to Obama and Nancy Pelosi for forcing him out. And I think that is why the reporters continue to ask Nancy Pelosi about her relationship with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, in which Nancy Pelosi is going to give some interesting answers that everybody can see is BS, right? That things are probably not great right now between her and Joe Biden. And clearly she's not feeling Kamala because she wasn't feeling Kamala a year ago, right? And she's definitely not feeling Kamala now because I don't think they actually wanted Kamala to be the candidate. But again, they were forced into it by Biden and Kamala after Joe Biden dropped out and then endorsed Kamala Harris. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi sitting down with CNN tonight, and she was asked about her relationship with President Biden since he dropped out of the race. So here is part of that one-on-one interview with Dana Bash.
The lawmakers who came out, 1, 2, 3, are some of the lawmakers who are closest to you. Adam Schiff, Jamie Raskin, Zoe Lofgren, with statements saying that they respectfully thought it was time for the president to step aside. I've had people say to me, and I just, as a longtime observer of you, thought, oh, wow, those are all Pelosi allies. You had nothing to do with that?
I have hundreds of allies in the Congress of the United States.
Oh, I know, but they're among the closest.
No,
to
I
you.
had nothing to do with that.
Okay.
And if you ask them, it's almost insulting to them because they're formidable figures in the Congress of the United States. They make their own judgment and their own statement.
Have you spoken to President Biden since he dropped out?
No, I have not.
Do you hope to?
Yes, I hope to.
Yeah.
We're all busy.
Is everything okay with your relationship?
You'd have to ask him, but I hope so.
Yeah, so clearly Nancy Pelosi is lying. Now, what really pisses me off about this interview is the fact that we know for certain that if Nancy Pelosi was a Republican, Dana Bash would not be such a pushover, right? She would not be so soft-spoken. You guys notice how, oh, well, they're your allies, Nancy. Did you force Joe Biden out? Oh, no, you didn't? Oh, okay. So how's your relationship with Joe? Is it doing good? Oh, okay. Now, again, notice how Dana Bash interviews Nancy Pelosi versus how she interviewed J.D. Vance yesterday.
And I can't believe I have to ask you this, but I do, because Donald Trump has been attacking Kamala Harris's racial identity.
He has not been, but ask your question.
Well, he questioned her racial identity. He said a number of years ago she happened to turn black. Her father is Jamaican. Do you believe Kamala Harris is black?
I believe that Kamala Harris is whatever she says she is, but I believe importantly that President Trump is right that she is a chameleon. She pretends to be one thing in front of one audience. She pretends to be something different in front of another audience. Look, Dana, she's not running a political campaign. She's running a movie. She only speaks to voters behind a teleprompter. Everything is scripted. She doesn't have her policy positions out there. She hasn't answered why she wanted to ban fracking, but now she doesn't. She wanted to fund police, but now she doesn't. She wanted to open the border, but now she doesn't. She should have to answer for why she presents a different set of policies to one audience and a different set of policies to another audience. And I think that's what President Trump is getting at. This is a fundamentally fake person. She's different depending on who she's in front of.
With respect, you
Please.
changed your position on an important thing, which is Donald Trump.
Of course I did.
And so why are
honest
you not a
about it.
chameleon?
Because, Dana, I've explained to the American people what's different. People change their minds when the facts change, they should. But if you want to be the people's vice president or president, you should have to stand before an interviewer and say, this is why I changed my mind. So to everybody who's seen that I criticized Donald Trump, since he asked the question, here are two things.
You didn't just criticize him. You said he could be America's Hitler.
Well, that's a criticism, and I didn't say.
So you guys see the difference, right? The difference is clear. When Dana Bash is in an interview with Republicans, she's ready to push back. She's much more forceful, and she has a much different tone than she has when she's sitting down with somebody like Nancy Pelosi, in which she's just softballing the whole time, right? Drooling over Nancy Pelosi. Well, I've been watching you from afar, and I just happened to notice that all of the people that were pushing for Joe Biden to drop out, they were your allies. Did you have anything to do with it, Nancy? Right? Again, it blows my mind. But second of all, what pisses me off is that they're not asking Nancy Pelosi the right questions. We all know she staged the coup, right? So just to even accept her explanation is just silly because she definitely was behind it, right? You really should move on to, was it actually democratic, right? How can you come out here and talk about saving democracy and preserving democracy when there appears to not be a democratic process within the Democrat Party? Like, what was democratic about Kamala Harris becoming the nominee for the Democrat Party? That's the real question, right? But they won't ask that question because a real journalist and not a propagandist would be concerned about the pattern of behavior that is developing in the Democrat Party, where they are just not going through the democratic process at all. Okay. Like, they didn't have a real primary. Okay. They essentially finagled their own primary in favor of Joe Biden, which is why they got stuck with Joe Biden and they had to stage a coup against him, because when it became clear to the American people that Joe Biden was in fact mentally declining and they couldn't hide it anymore, yeah, they had to switch him out for Kamala Harris. But they should have had a primary, because they all knew that Joe Biden was mentally declining way before it became so obvious that they couldn't deny it anymore, right? So again, there should be a lot of questions about whether or not the Democrats actually believe in democracy. But again, they will never, ever, ever confront Nancy Pelosi with an actual real question like that.
Very, very interesting. We're all very busy, is what she says.
In fairness, we are.
We are. I mean, but it really does suggest that the relationship is maybe the fact that they haven't even spoken, I think, speaks volumes.
Yeah, I mean, it appears there's some tension there. And listen, I was one of the people that I felt like, I'll be honest, that the power players in the Democratic Party did Joe Biden wrong. And my fear was they were going to skip over Vice President Kamala Harris, and they didn't. So we still have Vice President Harris on the ticket. But I guess we won't know until Biden does his book that every president does after they leave office. We'll see what really happened behind the scenes.
I think what Americans want to know is not what happened between Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, but why Kamala Harris wasn't more honest with the American public in the many months before the final resolution of this. Why she kept telling everyone that Joe Biden was on the top of his game when it was so obvious that he wasn't.
I think that this trope is
That
so
was
tired.
a lie.
Joe Biden was out there doing 3 interviews a day for the last 6 months. If he's trying to hide, he wasn't doing it in a very good job.
Wow.
And the other
No,
thing,
he was
the other
totally
thing that I will
incompetent.
say is that Joe Biden actually is a pretty busy guy, right? Like, his whole life has changed dramatically in the last 2 weeks, right? And so as he figures out what his legacy is going to be, what the last months of his presidency is going to be, like, having some time to actually, like, focus on that as opposed to a handful of interpersonal relationships, it's like, it's fair.
Bill, I mean, why is Pelosi trying to distance herself from
She screwed
this?
the president over.
Well, I mean,
come on here.
I think that maybe a lot of Democrats would be willing to admit at this point she was right.
No, but at the end of the day, it was his decision. Yes, there was pressure, but it was ultimately his decision. He sat down with his aides. He said, you know what? This isn't the right thing for me. I'm going to move on. It's going to be Vice President Harris's time. And that is the true thing. And, you know, the palace intrigue about, like, the conversations and what happened and whatnot, it was ultimately him. President of the United States decided.
Okay, so this guy right here is actually a bad person. I'm so serious right now, okay? Because this guy will just flat out lie to your face. Like, this level of gaslighting is actually just not cool, right? Like, it's just not okay. And that's why you have people at this table that are just like, WTF. Like, everybody knows that Pelosi pushed Biden out. Like, Biden didn't just talk to his aides and say, oh, I'm going to drop out, because Biden's own aides apparently didn't even know that he was dropping out. This is why you had people going on national television, including CNN, up until the day that Joe Biden dropped out, the morning that Joe Biden dropped out, still telling the media there's no way Joe Biden is dropping out. He's staying in the race. Like, what this dude is saying is just, like, it's just false, right? Like, he's just lying, okay? Like, this guy claims, oh, Joe Biden's so busy. Really? Joe Biden has taken more vacations than any president in office that we've had in a long, long, long time, right? Nobody vacations more than Joe Biden, okay? He just came off a vacation. He was spending time on the beach in Delaware. Also, on top of that, this clown claimed, in response to this woman rightfully bringing up the fact that the American people should know if/when Kamala Harris knew about Joe Biden's mental decline, and why didn't she say anything about it if she knew about it. This guy responds by saying, well, Joe Biden, it was hard to tell whether or not he was mentally declining because he was doing 3 press events, 3 events a day. And, you know, if he was declining, it was hard to tell because he was so active. And it's like, no. That's like the exact opposite of what happened, my guy. Everybody saw that he was declining. The media just covered it up, right? They came out and was saying that it's cheap fakes, okay? That Republicans were lying. And this is the reason why the Biden administration wasn't doing more events with the press, right? But eventually it got to the point where they couldn't hide it anymore. And Joe Biden had to do more events to prove that he was good, that he could do the job. But he obviously failed at that. But this idea that, oh, well, Joe Biden just started mentally declining. It's nonsense. It's ridiculous. Okay. Again, people like this guy right here. Again, this is a bad person, right? And unfortunately, he has sold his soul to the Democrat Party, right? Because only somebody that has sold their soul can gaslight like this with a straight face.
By the way, I just want to play this because I just think it's so fascinating. I mean, the Speaker Emerita is on a book tour, so she's out there doing these interviews. And here are two different statements made about the same person, President Biden.
Such a consequential president of the United States, a Mount Rushmore kind of president of the United States. I wasn't asking him to step down. I was asking for a campaign that would win. And I wasn't seeing that on the horizon.
Yeah. So again, logically speaking, this makes no sense. Okay. If Joe Biden was a Mount Rushmore president in the sense that he was one of the greatest presidents in American history, why is it that he needed to step down, right? If his policies were so great. Also, by the way, this is not backed up by any real facts and evidence, right? The data, Biden's approval does not suggest that he's anywhere close to the best president of the United States ever, okay? In fact, he may be one of the worst presidents, okay? I think that Joe Biden will probably go down as one of the worst presidents in American history if the historians actually tell the story correctly, which I am extremely worried about, right? I am worried about what historians will say about this period of time, right? They'll say that Joe Biden stepped down willingly, okay, and that there wasn't a coup, okay, and they also will claim that Kamala Harris was the first black woman president if she wins the election. Things that we know are lies, right? Again, I'm afraid that this is what they're going to write in the history books. This is why I am questioning a lot of the history that I've read, because I'm like, yo, right, living through history right now and seeing how the media is gaslighting and changing things in real time in regards to what really happened. Yeah, I got questions about a lot of the history that we read. But again, what Nancy Pelosi is saying here in this second clip is that, well, I didn't feel like his campaign was great. Like, I didn't feel like he had the spark. And I'm like, okay, well, if he was such a great president, why is it that you would feel like his campaign was not doing well or could not win the election if, again, he's such a great president? Like, it doesn't make sense, okay?
Both of those things can be true. I'm not trying to take up too much airtime, but both of those things can be true.
That's fair.
Like, he
But
could
very
be one
different
of the most
tones.
consequential
Yeah.
one-term presidents of all time. And smart people could look at what was happening and think, uh-oh, this isn't the right thing for the Democratic Party.
Look, I think a lot of
Again, this guy completely sold his soul, right? Notice how he said, well, two things can be true. He can be one of the most consequential one-term presidents in history, and smart people can look at him and say that, oh, well, you know, this is a good move for him to drop out. Now, again, I'm just not entirely sure how you can square that because, one, again, Biden's approval rating is historically low. So he definitely is not one of the best presidents in history. But again, according to this guy, he's up there enough to be on Mount Rushmore. But it was still the smart thing for him to drop out, even though, again, according to this guy, Joe Biden wasn't mentally declining. Right. Again, the only way you could even make that make sense is that you have to admit that Joe Biden was and is mentally declining. OK, and that's why he had to drop out. If you're going to say that his presidency was so great, because if his presidency was so great, there is no reason for him to drop out except if he was mentally declining to the point that he couldn't be president anymore. And then at that point, right, you would have to admit that the Democrats and the mainstream liberal media, Kamala Harris, everybody lied about Joe Biden mentally declining, okay? And they covered it up. But see, again, he doesn't even want to admit that, right? So again, what they're saying, just like what Nancy Pelosi saying, makes zero sense whatsoever, right? To anybody actually really listening, it's like you guys are just saying whatever. And the problem is that if this guy was a Republican saying some nonsense like this, the CNN host, Abby Phillip, would be correcting the Republican, right? Setting the Republicans straight, not letting them get away with these overt lies. But because this guy is an Obama operative, she's going to sit there and let this man say stuff that she knows for a fact does not make sense, right? She knows it, but she's not going to really push back on it in any meaningful way like she would if this guy was a Republican. That's the problem with the media. They let Democrats just get away with bullshit, right? Because that's all they put out there. That's it, but they just get away with it.
truthful. He was no longer capable
Go ahead, Chair Michael.
of winning an election, and he's actually no longer capable of serving as
That's
president.
completely
Sure, Michael.
right, considering that the hostages he released.
For a little over a year, a lot of Americans have had serious concerns about President Biden's age. I get from a strategic position why Democrats were looking at the numbers and saying, look, we need someone who's young, who's more invigorating for a plethora of our necessary coalitions to pull this thing off. I get that. And I've been critical of President Biden's age as well. But as I've had time to think about this, I do kind of feel bad for the president. I mean, this is someone who spent 5 years in public office to sort of be pushed out by your own party because he's aging. Hell, we're all going to age. I hope to God that if I'm 81 years old, I can still do whatever in the hell it is that I love doing. And I hope no one tries to force me out of that thing. So as a human being,
even if it's the presidency of the United
Abby,
States,
as a human being, I do have a level of empathy for the president, regardless of the job. But I also, as a strategist, recognize why Democrats saw the writing on the wall and said, Mr. President, it's time to go.
It was interesting also that she was asked by Dana about her relationship with Vice President Harris. Let's play that.
You were, and still are, always will be, the first female House Speaker. She, the first female Vice President. You're both San Franciscans. What's your relationship like?
Our relationship is fine. We're very excited and proud of her. We're proud of as I've said, personally, I just have so much esteem for her. She's a person of deep faith and deep commitment to public service.
Pretty ice.
Kamala, a person of deep faith and commitment to personal service. Now, she said that the relationship is fine, which means that it's terrible. Again, this is the same woman that struggled to endorse Kamala Harris just a year ago for vice president, right? And now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe that they all believe in Kamala and that she's the greatest thing ever. Again, this is BS, man.
See.
Yeah, that was cold. I mean, it seems like she doesn't really have a relationship with Vice President Harris at all. I mean, I thought maybe she wanted someone else. I mean, she didn't endorse her immediately like the Clintons and a plethora of others. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Nancy Pelosi. I respect her, although I differ from her politically. But, like, come on, let's not try to, lie to the American people.
She's been in this game for a long time.
Well, she has, Abby. Let's not pretend like we don't know that she was behind a lot of people coming out saying Biden needs to go.
I totally, listen, I mean, I'm a reporter. Like, we're not going to just take what she says
gaslighting.
Face value necessarily, but
you do that all the time, though. That is what you do, right? You do take what Democrats say and you never push back. And is that the point now where it's like, yo, smart people cannot just stand to be lied to like this and to pretend like she didn't have anything to do with it, right? To play this game that they would never play with Republicans.
Just saying, like, she doesn't go out there and say, it's fine, and not know that that's going to be read into.
Well, I mean, she knows that, right? But again, she's just trying to lie and to, not throw Kamala Harris under the bus publicly, okay? But give it a wink and a nod, knowing that, hey, I'm not too happy with Kamala Harris being the nominee, but I'm going to stomach it because, honestly, we can't get rid of Kamala Harris. At this point, she is a nominee because Joe Biden endorsed her, which makes sense in regards to why they're not talking, why Biden and Pelosi are probably not on the same page right now, okay? And Pelosi really doesn't like Kamala too much. So there's a whole lot of drama going on behind closed doors. I wish the media would actually do their damn jobs and ask Democrats real questions, but because they don't, this is what we get, okay? Just a bunch of BS from Nancy Pelosi that never gets called out. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.